I've never told this story before because, honestly, I'm still trying to understand what really happened. But 3 months ago, I was walking the empty streets of Bangkok at 3 a.m., calling out the name of a woman who had just vanished from my life like she never existed. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm 34 years old, a software engineer from Austin, Texas, and this is the story of how I gave up everything for love, only to discover that sometimes the person you think you know best is actually a complete stranger. What I'm about to share with you isn't your typical expat cautionary tale. This isn't about bar girls or obvious scams. This is about Ratchada, a university graduate from a middle-class family, someone who seemed like everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Someone who made me believe that fairy tale endings were possible, even for guys like me who had pretty much given up on love. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. 2 years ago, I was living what most people would consider a successful life in Austin. I had a well-paying job at a tech startup, a nice one-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, and enough money in the bank to feel secure. But here's the thing about success. Sometimes it can feel like the most beautiful prison in the world. I was 32, recently out of a 3-year relationship that had ended badly. Sarah, my ex, had made it clear that I was emotionally unavailable and going through the motions of life. Her words stung because they were true. I was working 60-hour weeks, coming home to Netflix and takeout, and wondering if this was really all there was. The breakup hit me harder than I expected. Not because I was devastated about losing Sarah, but because I realized she was right about everything. I was sleepwalking through life, accumulating achievements and possessions, but never really living. That's when I started researching digital nomad lifestyles, and Thailand kept coming up as this magical place where Westerners could live like kings while finding themselves. I booked a 2-week trip to Bangkok in March 2023, telling myself it was just a vacation, but from the moment I stepped off that plane, something shifted inside me. The warm air, the friendly people, the sense that life could be different, it was intoxicating. I rented a small apartment in the Niman area and set up a temporary workspace. For the first time in years, I felt alive. That's where I met Ratchada. It was my 5th day in Bangkok, and I was working from a coffee shop called Rister 8 to this trendy place that all the digital nomads frequented. I was struggling with a particularly frustrating piece of code when I heard someone say in perfect English, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I looked up and saw her. Ratchada, 28 years old, with shoulder-length black hair and these incredibly expressive eyes that seemed to hold both warmth and intelligence. She was carrying a laptop bag and wearing business casual clothes, definitely not what I expected from the Thailand stories I'd heard. "Please, sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I'm Jake, by the way." "Ratchada," she replied with a smile that made my stomach do a little flip. "Are you visiting Bangkok?" What followed was the most natural conversation I'd had in months. Ratchada worked at a local marketing agency, had graduated from Bangkok University with a degree in communications, and lived with her family in a suburb about 20 minutes from the city center. She wasn't trying to practice her English or asking about America. She was just being friendly. We talked for 2 hours about travel, about work, about life. She had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the world. When she laughed at my terrible jokes, it felt genuine. When she shared stories about her family and her dreams of maybe starting her own business someday, I found myself hanging on every word. "I should probably get back to work," she finally said, closing her laptop. "But this was really nice, Jake. Maybe I'll see you around." I wanted to ask for her number, but something held me back. Maybe it was the skeptical voice in my head warning me about being another Western guy chasing Thai women. Instead, I just said, "I hope so. I'll probably be here tomorrow around the same time." She smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." The next day, I showed up at Rister 8 to like a teenager with a crush. And there she was, already sitting at our table from the day before, sipping a latte and reading a book. When she saw me, her face lit up. "You came back," she said. "Did you doubt I would?" Well, you're a tourist. Tourist's leave. Something in her tone made me pause. What if I told you I was thinking about staying longer? That's when everything changed. Over the next week, Ratchada became my guide to the real Bangkok. Not the tourist version, but the city she had grown up in. She took me to local markets where no one spoke English, to temples that weren't in any guidebook, to family restaurants where her aunt worked and made me eat things I couldn't pronounce but tasted incredible. I met her parents on my 10th day in Thailand. They lived in a modest but comfortable house in a neighborhood that felt authentically Thai. Small shops, street food vendors, kids playing in the narrow streets. Her father, Somchai, was a retired teacher who spoke excellent English and peppered me with questions about American politics and technology. Her mother, Wasana, was quieter but incredibly welcoming, constantly bringing me food and tea. "They like you," Ratchada whispered to me as we sat on their small porch after dinner, watching the sunset. "My mother says you have kind eyes." "And what do you say?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. "I say she's right." That night, Ratchada and I kissed for the first time. It was soft and sweet and felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. 2 weeks later, when my original return date arrived, I changed my flight. Then I changed it again and again. I was falling in love, and for the first time in my adult life, it felt real. But eventually, reality intruded. My boss in Austin was getting impatient with my remote work arrangement, and Ratchada's job required her to be in the office. We were stealing moments together between our respective responsibilities, and it wasn't enough. "I don't want you to leave," she told me one evening as we walked along the Ping River. "But I also don't want you to stay for the wrong reasons." "What would be the wrong reasons?" "Because you're running away from something instead of running toward something." Her insight floored me. Because she was right, I had been running away. From my boring job, from my failed relationship, from a life that felt like it was happening to someone else. But somewhere along the way, I had started running toward something too, toward her, toward the possibility of a different kind of life. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I went back to Austin in August 2023, but this time with a plan. I was going to sell my condo, quit my job, and move to Thailand permanently. Not as a tourist or even a digital nomad, but as someone building a real life there, with Ratchada. The next 4 months were a whirlwind of preparation. I found a remote position with a company that was happy to have me work from anywhere. I sold my condo, which had appreciated nicely in Austin's crazy real estate market. I shipped my important belongings and gave away everything else. My friends thought I was having a midlife crisis. My parents worried I was making a huge mistake. But Ratchada was supportive through it all. We video called every day, sometimes for hours. She helped me find an apartment in Bangkok, assisted with visa paperwork, and even started teaching me basic Thai through our calls. Her excitement about our future together felt genuine and infectious. "I can't wait to show you what life is really like here," she told me during one of our calls. "Not tourist life, but real life. Our life." I arrived back in Bangkok on the 15th of December, 2023, with 2 suitcases and a heart full of hope. Ratchada picked me up at the airport, and when I saw her waiting for me in the arrival hall, I knew I had made the right decision. She ran to me, and when we hugged, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We moved into a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment near the old city. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Ratchada had decorated it with local art and plants, and she had set up a perfect workspace for me by the window overlooking a small garden. The first few months were everything I had dreamed of. I settled into a routine of working during the day while Ratchada was at her marketing job, then exploring the city together in the evenings. We took weekend trips to Pai, to the hot springs in Mae Hong Son, to beach towns in the south. We cooked together, with Ratchada teaching me to make real Thai food, not the tourist version. We studied Thai language together, and she was endlessly patient with my terrible pronunciation. I met more of her friends and extended family. Everyone was welcoming and seemed genuinely happy that Ratchada had found someone who made her smile so much. Her best friend Nim often joked that she had never seen Ratchada so happy. "You're good for her," Nim told me one evening when we were all out for drinks. "She lights up when she talks about you." Life felt perfect. But looking back now, I realize that's when the first small cracks started to appear. It began with little things. Ratchada would get phone calls that she would take in another room, speaking in rapid Thai that I couldn't follow. When I asked who called, she would give vague answers, work stuff or family drama. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone deserves privacy, right? Then there were the late nights. Ratchada started working later and later, often not coming home until 8 or 9 p.m. When I suggested bringing her dinner at the office, she quickly shut down the idea. "The office is very busy right now," she said. "It would be distracting to have visitors." I trusted her completely, so I didn't push, but I started to notice other small inconsistencies. She would mention colleagues whose names kept changing. She would talk about projects that didn't quite make sense. When I asked specific questions about her work, she would get defensive. "Why are you interrogating me?" she snapped one evening when I asked about a particularly confusing story involving a client meeting. "Don't you trust me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course I trusted her. I had given up everything to be with her, but the way she asked it with such hurt and anger made me feel like I was being paranoid and controlling. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm just interested in your life. I want to understand what you're dealing with at work." She softened immediately. "I know, and I love that about you. It's just been really stressful lately. I don't want to bring that stress home to you." That made sense. I apologized again and dropped the subject, but the feeling of unease lingered. Things came to a head in April. I had finished work early and decided to surprise Ratchada with lunch at her office. She had mentioned that her marketing agency was in a building near the university, so I bought some of her favorite somtam from a street vendor and headed over. The building she had described didn't exist. I walked up and down that street 3 times, checking and rechecking the address she had given me. I asked local shopkeepers if they knew of a marketing agency in the area. Nothing. I even called the building management company. They had no record of any marketing agency in their properties. Standing on that street corner, holding a bag of somtam that was getting warm in the afternoon sun, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. There had to be an explanation. Maybe I had misunderstood the address. Maybe she had mentioned a different location. When Ratchada came home that evening, I tried to bring it up casually. "I wanted to surprise you with lunch today, but I couldn't find your office building. Could you write down the exact address for me?" The color drained from her face. For just a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then she recovered quickly. "Oh, we moved offices last month. I forgot to tell you, the new place is... It's in a different area." "Where?" Near the night bazaar. I'll show you sometime." But she never did. And when I asked about it again a few days later, she got that defensive tone again. "Why is it so important for you to see my office? Are you checking up on me?" I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. Either I was being paranoid and controlling, or something was seriously wrong. The woman I loved, the woman I had moved halfway around the world for, was lying to me about where she worked. But why? That's when I made a decision that I'm still not sure was right or wrong. I decided to find out the truth. I started small. I began paying attention to details I had previously ignored. When Ratchada said she was working late, I would casually suggest picking her up. She always had a reason why that wouldn't work. She was going out with colleagues. She had to finish something important. She would take a taxi. I noticed that she never brought work home. No papers, no laptop work, no stressed phone calls about deadlines. For someone who claimed to be incredibly busy at a demanding job, she seemed remarkably free of work-related stress once she was home. Then there were the financial inconsistencies. Ratchada claimed to make about 25,000 baht per month at her marketing job, a decent salary for Bangkok. But she always seemed to have more money than that would allow. Designer handbags, expensive skincare products, frequent salon visits. When I asked about it, she said her parents helped her out sometimes. I felt sick about what I was doing, but I couldn't stop myself. I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me look like a paranoid, controlling foreigner who couldn't trust the woman he claimed to love. But I was drowning in confusion and lies, and I needed to know the truth. The investigator, a discreet Thai man named Krit who spoke excellent English, was professional and non-judgmental. I gave him Ratchada's full name, the address of the office building she claimed to work at, and asked him to simply verify her Ratchada. 3 days later, he called me with results that made my world collapse. Ratchada had never worked at any marketing agency in Bangkok. In fact, she had quit her last legitimate job at a small tourism company over 8 months ago, right around the time we had met. But that wasn't the worst part. Krit had discovered that Ratchada maintained a second apartment across town, in a complex popular with foreigners. The lease was in her name, and neighbors reported seeing her there regularly with different Western men. "I'm sorry," Krit said when he delivered his report, "but I think you should know that your girlfriend appears to be involved with multiple foreign men simultaneously." I stared at the photos he had taken. Ratchada entering and leaving the apartment. Ratchada with a tall German man who looked to be in his 50s. Ratchada with a younger British guy who had his arm around her waist. All of these photos were taken within the past month, while she was living with me, while she was telling me she loved me, while we were planning our future together. I felt like I was going to vomit. That evening, when Ratchada came home from her imaginary job, I was waiting for her with Krit's report spread out on our dining table. "We need to talk," I said. She saw the photos immediately. Her face went white, then red, then crumpled completely. "Jake, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'd really love to hear an explanation for this." I held up a photo of her kissing the German man outside the other apartment. She sat down heavily in the chair across from me and put her head in her hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "It's not what you think," she finally whispered. "Then tell me what it is." What came out next was a story so complex and heartbreaking that I'm still trying to process it. Ratchada's family wasn't middle class. Her father hadn't been a teacher, he had been a farmer who lost his land to debt. Her mother was sick and needed expensive medical treatment. The house I had visited belonged to her aunt and uncle, who had been pretending to be her parents. The other men weren't random foreigners she was scamming. They were part of an elaborate support network. The German man, Klaus, was helping pay for her mother's cancer treatment. The British guy, David, was helping with her younger brother's university fees. There were others too, men who believed they were in relationships with her, men who were helping her family survive. "I never meant for it to happen like this," she sobbed. "When I met you, I thought maybe I could stop. Maybe I could just be with you and find another way to help my family. But my mother got sicker, and my brother needed more money for school, and I couldn't let them down." "So you let me down instead?" "I love you, Jake. I really do. More than any of them. What we have is real." "How can it be real when it's built on lies?" She couldn't answer that. Neither could I. We argued for hours. I demanded to know everything, every lie, every man, every deception. She broke down and told me things that made me understand why she had made the choices she did, but also made me realize how completely I had been living in a fantasy. The woman I thought I knew didn't exist. The life we had built together was a performance. Even her love for me, which I still believed was real, was tangled up with financial desperation and family obligations that I couldn't begin to understand. "I'll end it," she promised through her tears. "I'll tell them all it's over. I'll find another way to help my family. Just please don't leave me." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. "I need time to think," I told her. "I need space to figure out what's real and what isn't." How much time? I don't know. That night we slept in the same bed but might as well have been on different planets. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had been so blind, so naive, so desperate to believe in a fairy tale that I had ignored every red flag. In the morning, I told Ratchada I was going to stay at a hotel for a few days while I sorted out my thoughts. She begged me not to go, promised again that she would fix everything, that she would prove her love was real. "I'll be here when you're ready to come home," she said as I packed a small bag. Those were the last words she ever spoke to me. I checked into a small hotel in the old city and spent 3 days in a haze of confusion and heartbreak. I barely ate, barely slept. I walked the streets of Bangkok like a ghost, trying to figure out how to rebuild my life from the ruins of my shattered illusions. On the fourth day, I decided I was ready to go back to our apartment and try to have a real conversation with Ratchada. I was willing to forgive her, to try to understand her situation, to see if we could build something genuine from the wreckage of our relationship. But when I opened the door to our apartment, I knew immediately that something was wrong. The air felt different, too still, too quiet. Ratchada was gone. Not just gone for the day, gone completely. Her clothes, her personal items, everything that had made the apartment feel like home. The only things left were my belongings and the furniture that had come with the place. On the kitchen counter, I found a handwritten note in English. "Jake, I'm sorry for everything. I know you can never forgive me, and I don't deserve your forgiveness anyway. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, but I can't keep hurting you. Please don't try to find me. Take care of yourself, P." That was it. No explanation of where she was going, no forwarding address, no way to contact her. She had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. I called her phone, disconnected. I went to her family's house. They claimed they didn't know where she was. I even tried to contact the other men from the photos, but Crit couldn't locate them either. It was like Ratchada had simply evaporated. That's when I found myself walking the streets of Bangkok at 3 a.m., calling out her name like a madman. I searched every place we had been together, every restaurant we had eaten at, every temple we had visited. I showed her photo to shopkeepers and taxi drivers and hotel clerks. Nothing. I also discovered that our shared bank account had been emptied. Not completely cleaned out, but about 200,000 baht was missing. Money I had transferred there for household expenses and our planned trip to the islands. The police were polite but unhelpful. Ratchada hadn't committed any crime, they explained. She was an adult who had chosen to leave. The missing money would be difficult to recover without proof of theft, and since it was a shared account, technically she had a right to withdraw it. That was 3 months ago. I'm still in Bangkok, living in a different apartment now, trying to piece together what happened and why. I've had a lot of time to think about this story, and I've come to some conclusions that might surprise you. First, I don't think Ratchada was a scammer in the traditional sense. I think she was a desperate woman trying to help her family survive, who got caught up in a web of lies that became too complex to maintain. Her feelings for me were real. I still believe that. But they were complicated by financial desperation and family obligations that I couldn't understand as a privileged Westerner. Second, I was incredibly naive. I wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale of finding true love in an exotic location that I ignored red flags that should have been obvious. I was so eager to escape my boring life in Austin that I projected all my romantic fantasies onto a woman I barely knew. Third, cultural differences are real and significant, even when you think you're being respectful and understanding. The pressures on Thai women to support their families, the different attitudes toward relationships and financial obligations, the complex social dynamics that I was completely oblivious to, these aren't excuses for deception, but they are factors that I should have tried harder to understand. So where does this leave me? I'm still in Thailand, but I'm here differently now. I'm not chasing a romantic fantasy or running away from my problems. I'm building a life here step by step with my eyes wide open. I've made real friends, both Thai and expat. I'm learning the language properly. I'm volunteering with local organizations and trying to understand this country beyond the surface level that most tourists and expats never get past. and I'm dating again, carefully and slowly. I've met some wonderful women, both Thai and from other countries, and I'm learning to build relationships based on honesty and genuine compatibility rather than fantasy and projection. Do I regret coming to Thailand? Despite everything that happened with Ratchada, this experience has taught me more about myself than any other period of my life. I've learned that I'm capable of taking risks, of loving deeply, of surviving heartbreak and betrayal. I've learned that fairy tales don't exist, but that real life can be even more beautiful and meaningful than any fairy tale. Do I regret trusting Ratchada? That's a harder question. Part of me wishes I had been more skeptical, more careful, more protective of my heart and my bank account. But another part of me is glad that I was capable of trusting completely, of loving without reservation, even if it led to pain. Would I do it again? Probably not in the same way. But I would still take the risk of loving someone, even knowing that love can hurt. As for Ratchada, I hope she's okay. I hope she found another way to help her family. I hope she's able to build a life based on honesty rather than deception. And despite everything, I hope she remembers our time together with some fondness, because despite the lies and the pain, we did share some genuinely beautiful moments. If you're thinking about making a big life change, about following your heart to another country, about giving up everything for love, I won't tell you not to do it. But I will tell you to do it with your eyes open. Don't ignore red flags because you want to believe in a fairy tale. Don't project your fantasies onto people you don't really know. And don't confuse running away from something with running towards something. Thailand is an incredible country with wonderful people and amazing opportunities. But it's not a magical place where all your problems disappear and all your dreams come true. It's a real place with real people dealing with real problems, just like everywhere else. The fairy tale ending I thought I was going to get didn't happen, but maybe that's okay. Maybe real life, with all its complications and heartbreak and unexpected turns, is better than any fairy tale anyway. At least, that's what I'm choosing to believe.